Welcome to the Raising Cinephiles podcast, a show about passing on your love of cinema to the next generation. I'm your host, Jessica Kantor, and I have worked in all facets of the entertainment industry for the last 20 years, and recently became a mom. In today's episode, Raven Metzner discusses how he's shared his passion for cinema with his 27-year-old son, 6-year-old daughter, and soon with his 3-month-old. He showed me the ropes in so many ways, and I cannot wait for everyone to hear this episode. Always remember that myself and guests are speaking from personal experience and not giving parenting advice. Let's go ahead and dive into the episode. Welcome back to the Raising Cinephiles podcast. This is your host, Jessica Kantor, and I'm here today with Raven Metzner, who is a dear friend. He's a showrunner, producer, writer. He previously was the showrunner of the second season of Iron Fist and an EP on Sleepy Hollow. And we met really long time ago. My first time ever working on a television show. It was a show that he created called 6 Degrees, and I was his assistant with his then writing partner, Stu Zickerman. And it was an incredible opportunity for me to learn about this industry. I am so happy that we've stayed friends all these years and become surfing buddies and parents again together. Well, you again, me for the first time. Welcome, Raven.
It's great to be here, Jessica. Hello. And yes, it is how we met, but let's be honest. I wouldn't have ever called you an assistant. You basically ran the show. Let's just say what was really happening. But yeah, it's lovely to be here. And I echo that sentiment. It's great that our friendship has lasted all these years and we've had such great times together. And we've gone to a bunch of movies together and talked a lot about movies and cinema. So this will be a really fun conversation.
Yeah. And funny though, I have never asked you this first question, which is, what is your first movie memory?
It's a great question. I have a strange answer. Probably not the first movie that I remember, but it's certainly one that struck me, I think, first was my parents took me to see at a very young age. I think I was probably 4 or 5 to see Francois Truffaut's The Wild Child, which was not a movie that I would take a 4-year-old to see. But I remember watching a black and white movie with subtitles and not really comprehending what it was, but being very intrigued by it. And my parents always have used that as a little bit of a badge of honor. My mom's like, always, I'm sure you're a screenwriter because the first movie you ever saw was Francois Truffaut's The Wild Child. And I'm like, I don't remember, but I vaguely remember. But anyway.
So you remember that one. Is there a movie that struck you, that the one that you feel like you had to see twice?
Yeah, I really liked movies, and I was very lucky. We had a movie theater near my parents had a place upstate New York, and there was a movie theater near there, and they would drop us there on Saturdays. So I saw a lot of early Disney movies and animated films and a lot of great older movies. But I think actually Indiana Jones, like Raiders of the Lost Ark, like I was a little guy. I saw it in the theater when it came out, and that was the first time ever where I was with my friends, and we were like, we just didn't leave the theater. We're like, let's just stay and watch it again, and we did. And it still remains one of my favorite movies, the tone of that movie. But I remember watching that and getting caught up in it, and in a way I hadn't really been caught up in anything else before.
You said your parents would drop you at the cinema when you were quite young. I know you have a lot of siblings. Was this like a sibling activity?
Yeah, there was a sibling activity where they would drop me and my 2 younger sisters at the time, and then as more kids appeared and we were able to take care of them, then they could come too. But we would go this movie theater, the Crandall, beautiful theater in Chatham, New York, still there, and then they actually now show foreign films and international films, and they have a great selection of movies. But at the time, it was a family-run chain, and they would show whatever movie they'd show that week. They would also on Saturdays have a kids matinee. My parents would drop us there in the early afternoon, and we would watch the movie, and then they'd come pick us up, and they'd give us money for candy and stuff. And it was great. And we saw a lot of. That's where I was able to see all the Disney great early Disney animated films on screen, which was really cool, like Snow White and Sleeping Beauty. And then also, I think in that time period, because it was the late 70s, as Little Mermaid, the resurgence of Disney animation came back, I was able to see all those there too. So it was pretty cool.
That's cool. And did you have fun conversations with your siblings about those films?
We just were excited to be at the movies. Mostly our conversations were about what candy we were going to eat, to be honest. Like it was like, are you going to get a Rolo? Are you going to get M&Ms? Like we were mostly about that. But we didn't really talk about them much afterwards. I think I didn't really start talking about movies or thinking about movies in a more studied way until I was in elementary school and high school. And I lived like that movie theater in New York City on the Upper West Side. There was an incredible video store when video stores first started happening called Video Visions that stocked a really amazing selection of VHS and Betamax tapes. And there was a guy there, Gary, who worked there, and a couple other people that worked there. But they were very kind of like aggressive about your choices. If you bring them movies that they thought were mediocre, they'd be like, "Come on, kid, don't watch that. Watch this." I got a very interesting sort of cinephile education from these Columbia student Video Vision store clerks who said to me like, "Why don't you watch a Martin Brest film?" Everything was arranged by director, and they'd be like, "What did you like that?" I'd be like, "Yeah, I like that actor." And they're like, "Oh, if you like that actor, then watch this film." Or so they were really. That was the first time I thought, and with them, I could have what I would say was more like cinephile conversations.
Yeah, it also opens up to it, the craft also, that it's not just an entertainment anymore, that there's a craft to cinema.
Yes, yes. So when they turned me on to Orson Welles films, and I went to see Touch of Evil, they told me before I watched it, they're like, "Hey, by the way, there's like the longest tracking shot in history is in the beginning of this movie." So I was like, "What does that mean?" And then they explained it to me, and then as I watched it, I was like, "Wow, cool!" And it's interesting. I know this is directed towards family and how you can help your kids or raise your kids as cinephiles. One of the things that my mom did, which was great, was she told me that as many videos as I wanted to rent from Video Visions, I could rent. And that was up to 4 a night. And then she didn't mind my sitting up and watching them as late as I wanted to watch them. And she'd even watch a couple with me. And when she did, then we would also have conversations. Like we'd pause it if we noticed something cool, like we saw Hitchcock walk through the frame or saw some cool, amazing camera angle or something. My mom would point it out or I'd point it out. We try to figure out how it was done or that kind of stuff. So she gave me she paid for my cinema education.
Yes, but that's so special, like such a special way for you to spend time with her and have these inside conversations.
Yeah. My dad and he was a filmmaker. He made TV commercials, but he loved to go to the movies. And I went to a lot of movies with him. He didn't talk a lot about the craft or the directing of it, but he definitely had his own taste. He also took us to a lot of movies that I think my parents didn't really believe in the whole like age appropriate or movie ratings. If it was a great movie, they were like, "It's okay, you can go, or we're going to take you." So they took me to see The Shining when I was 14 or something, which was terrifying. American Werewolf in London. I saw a couple of movies like that. My dad knew I loved David Bowie, and he took me to see there's a live concert movie called Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars, which is a beautiful live film. So you can see that. And he also met me after school one day and brought me to another theater on the Upper West Side. I'm trying to remember which one it was. I think it might have been near the Symphony Space, but to see Blade Runner because he knew I loved science fiction. And it was nice. He would definitely include all of his kids in going to the movies.
That's great. And you're a voracious reader.
Yes.
All sorts of, from science fiction to comic books and we have that in common. We just can't get enough story ever. Right. And I'm curious, did your dad knew you like science fiction, so he bridged the gap between the books you were reading and the movies that were coming out? Was that something your parents did a lot?
It was something that they would always, if I had an interest in something, they were great about bringing me to that place. So If I had interest in astronomy, which I did, they took me to the Hayden Planetarium. If I had a question about something, rather than just being like, oh, trying to give me an answer, and there was no internet, so they would take me to the place where the thing was. If I asked them to take me to see like Ziggy Stardust, or if there was a book that I loved that was going to be adapted into a movie, I really wanted to go, then my parents would definitely take me. They also were great about, we did a lot of I still do with my kids, but we did a lot of our shopping at thrift stores and at yard sales. But when I went to those things, if I ever pulled out a book that I thought was interesting, my dad would always buy it for me. There was never a question of, if I wanted to read a book, he'd be like, sure. There was never like, no, not now. And then when it came to knowledge about those things, they liked science fiction probably not as much as I did, but they were always willing to entertain something that we kids wanted to do. They wouldn't be like, no, you should see our thing. They would go with us to do, which I like to try to do with my kids as well. Take them to movies that they're going to love and not just movies that I'm going to love.
Yeah. So do you think taste is nature or nurture?
That's a really great question. I don't know. I think everyone watches things more, even more so now. People watch things for very different reasons. People come to all their content for very different reasons. I find a lot of people come to their streaming content for comfort sometimes, or because they want to not feel, for example, like lonely, like it's having a companion in a way. I feel like some people watch things because there is this new terminology, like it's easy to watch, which I think is interesting. I don't know if it's nature or nurture, but I don't typically watch things that I think are easy. I don't mind. I like to watch things, and also I have with my kids as well. I have forced them to watch things that at first they were like, I don't think I like this. I'm like, you should continue watching. A great example of that was when my son was I think it was 16 or so. I made him watch John Carpenter's The Thing, and the first 20 minutes he's complaining, this isn't scary. I don't care about this. This is terrible. It's so boring. And then 40 minutes in, there's a great moment where, I don't need to spoil it, but there's a great moment around 40 minutes in where everything goes haywire. And he leapt out of his seat. And to this day, it's one of his favorite films, but he credits me with keeping his butt in the seat.
Okay, before we move on to your kids, I wanted to ask you, when in your kind of childhood, adolescence, college age, did you realize you wanted to work in this industry?
That's another great question. My dad was very negative on Hollywood. Not that he knew anything about it. He was a TV commercial director. He'd always wanted to be a filmmaker and got into advertising and couldn't get into film. And he always felt that Hollywood was a place where people ate you alive. He used to say that if you were to go to Hollywood, you should take a shotgun loaded for bear. I don't know what that means, but that's literally what he would say. He would say it over and over again. You have to have a shotgun loaded for bear. And he was really negative on it. I loved movies and to some extent really loved television, especially animated television. And I always was like a fan of those things, but I didn't think I was going to be involved in it. I actually wanted to be a novelist. And it wasn't until actually my late 20s that I considered that maybe I'd want to be a part of making movies. And I think the big impetus was less of a creative one and more that being a novelist or writing was very lonely. And one of the great things about film is its collaborative nature, and television especially. So I was very glad to no longer be all alone. And I ended up in a writing partnership. Like I just was lonely for people. So I was a fan. I'd always loved movies and television and had watched a lot of movies and of all kinds and enjoyed them for different reasons. Took film classes in college, took foreign film classes in college. But then, it was not until my early 20s. Soon, I met you only a few years later after I had just been exposed to the idea.
I would have never known. I had read a lot of, I didn't know that. I read a lot of scripts because I was in assistant to a development exec, which meant I read a script or two a day in her office and 10 on the weekends. And so I read a lot of writers, and I'm always and still am shocked by some of the primitive nature of the writing that gets made. But reading your scripts, they're visceral and alive characters and a lot happening and lots of layers. And I'm curious what that transition was like for you, moving from novel writing, prose to screenwriting.
It was really difficult. I think there was two difficult things about it. One is that writing prose is, I like to think of it almost like there's like a single point that's moving through space, and that point is your consciousness that's describing, right? It's like a voice and as someone reads it, they're taking in. So it's almost like same experience as listening to a record on a phonograph table. Like it's a single point and it's a perspective that's feeding you this single track. And it's from very internal, even if it's an external narrator or omniscient narrator, it's still a very emotional internal process by which you create that kind of work, and also by which it's received. Reading is such a solitary and personal thing, right? Creating a film script is creating a blueprint, right, for shooting something. And so while scripts need to also be creative and fun to read, they're the pieces that need to be created are not narrative pieces. Some of them are functional, right? Or structural. And so that was really hard for me, because it felt like instead of being on the single point on the inside, you're suddenly on the outside looking in. And then my early attempts at writing, because of that, weren't visceral. They were very, glancing and constructed, because I was putting all these things in place, almost like playing with Lego blocks, and as opposed to trying to infuse a character or infuse a narrative with emotion or tension or any of those things. So it was a really different headspace to get into. I think the thing that I finally realized was the key, was that, for me anyway, was that when you're writing a story, you are transmitting your stuff, you write it, and then you hand it to someone. Sure, you can read it aloud, but mostly it's going to be something that someone's going to take it and read it. One of the great things about writing television and movies is you are pitching, it's verbal, you can tell someone a scene without the dialogue. You can talk about the intention of a scene. And I think once I learned how to integrate, I guess, almost performance into writing, then it became much easier.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I want to talk to you more about this, and almost want you to do a seminar for my writing friends, because I think it's a really interesting perspective when you really understand the craft of the written word versus a lot of people who understand cinema, but they don't understand writing, and you can tell the difference in the scripts.
Oh, I think one thing you did, which is really invaluable and really great for your education as a filmmaker, which is awesome, is you read all those scripts. And I think one of the things that I've noticed even today, not everybody, but if you ask someone what their favorite movie is, they're glad to tell you. If you ask someone what their favorite script is, they're like, huh? And you're like, what, or what screenwriter excites you? What kind of, who on the page excites you? And very few people have an answer to that, because they honestly haven't read a lot of scripts. Maybe they read some in college. And I think one of the really important things to do is to always be watching, but also always be reading, especially when you love something. We'll talk about it more when we talk about our kids, but I think that there's a really great correlation that you can do when you're with a kid, where they understand that a movie is a type of narrative, and there's many ways to explicate a narrative. But as soon as my daughter can read, I'm gonna try to give her some scripts to read of her favorite movies. And with my son, I've done that, where he's been like, I love that movie. I'm like, then read the script. And it's always very interesting. So there's a great magazine as well. It's no longer in print, but you can find it on eBay, called Scenario Magazine, that would reprint great movies per issue and then have articles about them. And they also would do like the first draft of something and then the one that got made in the same magazine. So like you can read Groundhog Day, the original that's sold, and then you can read the Harold Ramis rewrite of Groundhog Day. And that is in itself, you could just literally read those two scripts and you would learn it's just invaluable. You're like, everyone's, oh, I'll rewrite that script. And then you're like, when you read his rewrite, you go, oh, now I see what it means to rewrite a script to a place where someone wants to make it. You know?
Oh, that's really
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have to say my writers group does a script club as part of it. So not only do we read each other's work, but we pick something that we're all interested in and get together for dinner and talk about it. And it keeps us honest.
A script I read recently that you guys should look at, which I thought was great, is Eric Heiser's Bird Box, which is very different than the movie that got made. But one of the, in terms of just really showing what you can do, both with structure and style, he is one of our great modern day high quality feature writers and who works in lots of different genres, but he was at the height of his powers in that one. It's great to read.
Yeah. I'll never forget when I read something at Sony, which was right before I worked for you. And it just blew me away that I made every exec read it. And I think they bought it. It was Alan Loeb's Only Living Boy in New York.
Oh, yeah, yeah. That's
which
awesome.
got made
Yeah.
eventually, and I think they ended up going back very close to the original script. It like got changed a lot over the years and then came back, but I think at the time it was too close to Igby Goes Down, but it was just, I just fell in love with it. It felt like a dream, like I entered a dream world when I read it.
Yeah, that's an awesome script. And it's interesting because I think also a lot of scripts are reprinted. They're not reprinted in like traditional screenplay format. And I think it's great if you can get your hands on them online. There's a bunch of great sites. There's like a site called like scripts.com, whatever. It's all free and you can download them. But it's very interesting to look at not just the dialogue, but to understand that the writer is create, like a lot of people, interesting, even my kids, like they're like, oh, so you wrote what the characters are saying, you're a writer. And I'm like, no, I wrote the story and put everything in there that's on the screen was it mostly in the script. And they're like, what do you mean you put it in there? And then so I think it's great when if you read a script that even has, it's an amazing script for what's that Robert Redford movie where he's on the sailboat? So good. It's J.K. Chandor, I
Oh,
think, wrote it.
yeah.
All is
All is
Lost.
Lost, yeah.
All is Lost has one line of dialogue. It's one of the most gripping scripts. A few lines of dialogue, but mostly it's just silent, and it's phenomenal.
I saw
Phenomenal
it, yeah.
read. You know,
It was a great watch too. It translated really well. Yeah, it is really interesting. I'm going to transition us now to your children.
Okay.
Tell me the ages of your kids so I can level set for everyone.
So my oldest son is 27. My oldest child, he's 27. I have a daughter who is 6 years old and another daughter who's brand new. She is just 3 months old. But I also, with sisters and brothers, as you said, I have a brother who's 13 years younger than me. So I also have had the experience of pushing him towards different movies and stuff when he was coming up as well. So it's been and also look, to be honest, the same happens in reverse. Like my kids often show me things like my son, he has turned me on to a lot of great anime recently, and he's something he really knows. And so I love when it gets turned around and I get educated by the new generation.
I think I've known him since he was 12. Is that
Yeah.
right? Or even
Yeah.
younger.
I think he was 12, yeah.
Yeah. No, he was younger than that.
Really?
I think it was 2006.
Yeah.
Because he was like grade school, like he was not in middle school yet. Like he was young.
No. Yeah.
Oh, all right, let's start. Do you remember the first movie you showed him?
Gosh, yes. I showed him. He was in the theater in A Babe in Arms for Toy Story. I don't know that he knew it was happening, but that was the first movie he was brought to. First movie I showed him, I think we just watched it was probably a Disney movie. I think we did a lot of Disney at the time. But then we've gone to see a lot of movies together, and mostly I infected him with the sci-fi genre thing. So fantasy, sci-fi, superheroes, we go see all those movies together. And then there's a great theater in New York, the Film Forum. And when he got to be around 12, 13, 14, I would force him to go see the 1938 King Kong, to go see Charlie Chaplin films, to go see anything that was playing at the film forum that I thought was important for his film education, I would insist he go with me. And mostly he'd be into it. Since then his big genre that he's into is noir films. I took him to see a lot of those in original prints and stuff at the film forum, but now he just watches them on his own. He's seen a whole bunch of noir.
Yeah, I've always felt so lucky that you included me sometimes when you took him to see some of the big movies. Did he ever develop that culture of going to the movies with his friends when he was a teenager?
No, it's interesting. I don't know. Every once in a while, he would go, but it was never like a thing. It's something that I did because we didn't have VHS tapes readily available. I did sometimes at home, but it wasn't like we're going to all go to the video store and pick out a video and go to someone's house. So we would go and meet up at the movies and go to the movies all the time. That was like the thing. I think that for him, in his generation, they would watch DVDs. They'd come over to someone's house with DVDs, or they would raid a parent's DVD closet for stuff. And then when streaming happened, they would Netflix it out, you know?
I had VHS pretty readily, but I still, like in high school, went to movies, and even like middle school, it was a social thing to hang out in the lobby of the movie theater. There was arcade games in the lobbies. It was safe to be dropped off and just be alone at the movies with your friends. I
think it was more expensive is what happened, so that if I were to take him and his friends to the movies, cool, he'd go, but it wasn't something that they could go do. You know what I mean? Or it was more of an ask, because it was like to go to the movies even back in the 90s and get a soda and a popcorn was like $30. When I was a kid, my parents, like I said, would drop me at the Crandall Theater. It was $1.25 to get in and 25 cents for any candy bar you wanted. Like it was, so I think that it's just, maybe that was part of it, was that it started to become prohibitively expensive.
Yeah, that's too bad. It was really fun. It was like, it allowed you to run into people and for more spontaneity to happen, to feel a little more independent out in the world.
The one thing we would do, which I don't want to get in trouble for it, but I'm just going to say it, is at the Cineplex Odeon in Battery Park, we would sneak into movies and then then do a triple feature, and whatever other movies were playing, we would go do that. And my son and I would do that together too for fun. And we'd pick one movie, then we'd stay for another two or whatever. And I think that him and his friends definitely did that because there was it was like there was more value, I guess, to it, and also a little more risk. They were like New York City guys.
I did that too. I also I remember bringing like 40s in my backpack into the movie theater, and like
back before you could just buy alcohol in the movie theater.
Yeah, exactly. I was underage, so I wouldn't have been able to. But yeah, I remember sipping a 40 with a straw watching The Matrix at Lincoln Square. Yeah.
Awesome.
And with your son, did you find that he really had a strong taste of his own, or that he was really interested in some of the things you showed him?
As I said, he definitely had his own taste. He likes action-packed, in-your-face movies. He's not the most giant fan of things that don't grab your attention. He likes a lot of spectacle. He likes sci-fi, action, horror, animated movies, things that are, he'll go to a movie, as I said, if I force him to, and he'll come out of it and go, that was interesting. But straight drama is not really his thing. And definitely as I said, he's developed his taste for a certain type of film. He's really attuned to new anime, and when new anime comes out, he always gets tickets for us, and then we go. Or even just, I think it's like Japanese movies. Like he brought me to see Shin Godzilla, which is one of the best, I'd say the best of the Godzilla movies ever made, that came out it was 2008. And that was him. He was like, got to see this movie. He loves Godzilla and he loves Japanese movies. So yeah, I think his taste veers towards genre and very like in your face stuff.
And does he video game? Is he a video gamer?
Yeah, big time.
How does that compete with his movie watching?
I think it's great. I hadn't even thought about that. It's a great correlation. I think that video games might be why his movie tastes are like that. Like all kids in his generation, he was really into Call of Duty. Came out when he was a kid, and he played a lot of like first person shooter he's played every video game, but maybe that experience of being more in it might be why he likes big movies. Also, just coincidentally, his birthday is in November, and when he was a little guy, the Harry Potter movies would all be released literally either on his birthday or the day after every couple of years. So he would have a birthday party where he would bring a whole bunch of his friends to see the latest Harry Potter. And then once those movies stopped, the James Bond movies replaced them in November. He holds the Harry Potter movies in the late after Casino Royale. All
Yeah.
those James Bonds are his like birthday films.
I love that. I love the movie birthday parties.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, we talked a lot about story and reading with your son, and I have a lot of questions about your 6-year-old because she's much closer to where I'm about to get to and whatnot. Yeah. But does the video games that he also feel like he's exploring story worlds and story?
Yeah, I think there's characters that he likes, and he's very emotional and connected, and he likes to see himself in certain characters. And I think it's like that in video games and in movies and in TV. He loves The Matrix, loves Neo. He has a really hard time watching comedies where someone is embarrassed, like he can't watch The Office. It bums him out. So like any movie that's slapstick like that, where someone's getting a liar, like he's not into it. And I think part of that has to do with he gets very lost in the story. Like he really connects to a movie. He doesn't have that remove where he's looking at it like I'm watching it. And I'm also watching with a critical faculty. He's just like in it, you know?
Yeah. So for your 6-year-old, I remember you telling me that you were reading her books before taking her to the movies. And I loved that so much. And could you talk to me a little bit about it?
Yeah, we were very slow to introduce her to screens. I went to a Waldorf school, and they really took their times with screens, and we decided to experiment with her and try that. And not that I'm super opposed to kids and screens, it was just something we wanted to do with her, and we were like, let's take her to a movie and let her watch TV when she's 3, which is pretty late. And we were like, then we need to give her things to do. So the things that we did was we gave her a lot of art stuff, a lot of pencil, a lot of crayons, paints, all that stuff. We gave her Audible. She could listen to stuff on Audible. And we gave her reading. We read to her a lot. And one of the things we decided to do, which I think was my wife's idea, which I thought was really smart, was a lot of times young children will watch a movie and then something scary will happen and then they'll be turned off to the movie. Like, for example, Willy Wonka. I made the mistake of introducing that a little early with my daughter. And when they go through the tunnel, she was like, turn this off. And she hasn't wanted to watch Willy Wonka since then because she remembers it as being really scary. For example, The Wicked Witch and Wizard of Oz. A lot of people are terrified of The Wicked Witch and the Flying Monkeys. And I actually had on my iPad, Eric Schenauer did this amazing run of Wizard of Oz comics from Marvel Comics that are him and Scotty Young. They're super beautiful and they're very faithful, not to the movies, but to the books. So I was reading her the Wizard of Oz comic books and she loved them. And then Catherine was like, oh, let's read her the book, the real book. And then we read her Wizard of Oz and she loved Wizard of Oz. So then we were like, oh, this is cool. Let's see if we can read her the thing so that she has her own, because she had her own imagination of Dorothy before she ever saw Dorothy. And for me, a lot of times when I was a kid, I hadn't read it first, right? So like that Dorothy was Dorothy to me. That was that Tin Man. Then you read the books and you go, oh, this is different, but it's stuck in your head. And so when it came time, for example, for Harry Potter at around age 5, we're like, all right, let's introduce her to Harry Potter. We were like, let's read her the books first. And we made a deal with her, which was if she read the first or had the first 4 books read to her, then she could watch the first 4 movies. So she read the first 4 all the way through. And again, by the time she finished the first one, she wanted to see that movie so badly. But we kept saying to her, just trust us. You have Harry Potter in your own mind. You have Hermione in your own mind. the actors are great, but it's great that you have your own imagination of them. Much like the people who first read Harry Potter, right? They had
Yeah.
that great book cover and those books. Whenever possible, we still do that. We're like, and we've also really tried to limit her. She loves to watch movies. She loves to watch TV. She would just sit and watch streaming My Little Pony, like, and Pokemon, like, for endless hours. So we've made it more, hey, she can watch on the weekends and on the weekend nights, right? And then other than that, she can always either have a book read to her or she can listen to Audible. So through Audible, she discovered Beverly Clearly's Ramona and Beezus books. She loves those. And then she saw the movie, which is a really good movie. She read Harriet the Spy, and then she saw the animated series. She read the Snoopy comic strips, and then she saw the Snoopy. So as much as we can, we're like, let's do it either through Audible or through us reading to her. Oh, the other one was Smurfs. She played with Smurfs and read Smurfs for about 3 years. And then I was like, there's a Smurf cartoon. And she's like, oh, let me check it out. She watched it. She's like, it's okay. I like the comics and the toys better. So we just we try to always come at it from the story perspective before we introduce the visual. Because same thing I was saying about my son is that kids especially, it's a very real experience for them when they're watching something. They believe it, they feel it. And so if there's something scary or dangerous, they're going to it's terrifying. If they know the story beforehand, they know it's coming. Like when Harry Potter, in Goblet of Fire, when the giant snake comes out, she said, in a minute, that snake's going to bite his arm. I'm going to have my eyes closed and then I'll open. Like she knew it was coming. And it was so much better.
Yeah. When did she, like, I sometimes think my son is really visual because he loves to read books with me. But if I put audio on, he just goes off and does his own thing. But he's still so young. He's 17 months. When did your daughter start being able to follow stories?
She was a little bit older than that. We had to read her stuff, like, to keep her. And also, I gotta say, honestly, like, comic books, I know are so, like, adult now, but there's so many great kids comics that are really wonderful that you can get your hands on that are kids that pull kids in. Little Lulu is phenomenal. And Popeye, some of it is you have to explain that maybe this is not the way people in the world talk anymore, or there's things that you have to censor a couple things, but it was probably around 2.5, 3, where we would show her the Audible app and let her listen to it, and then she now knows where her books are. She starts them, she pauses them.
Yeah, there's that little speaker box that has characters that I can have I can have my family members record stories and add stories and stuff. So I might do that for him for his 2-year-old birthday and I'll buy the big thing and then ask everyone as gifts to send stories.
That's cool.
That's what I'm thinking. I've been wanting that for him. We do some screen time just out of practicality so I can shower. But yeah. There's a Netflix show off of the book Go Dog Go. So we had been reading that book for a while, over and over again, and showed him the show. And he'll either be really into something or he'll just not want to sit and watch, rather be outside.
I think the first movie that we showed my youngest daughter was The Wizard of Oz, as I said. And then the next movie that we showed her was Kiki's Delivery Service and My Neighbor Totoro. Oh. And I think that those two movies are two of the great, Kiki and Totoro are two of the greatest kid movies that you could possibly show anybody.
I had another guest, Shannon Lee. She recommended My Neighbor Totoro. And so that one is on my list. I would love if you have a link to the Wizard of Oz comic.
Yeah, I'll send it your way. It's really, and there's a lot of them. He did really well. And he did, I think it was like, there's a big omnibus you can get, but it's like, there's a lot of them and they're so beautiful. They're fantastic.
Yeah. And I had another guest talk about reading during COVID. They were trying to keep their sons from going, like all of them from going crazy. So they said you could have, if you read the book, we'll let you watch the movie. So they did Chitty Chitty Bang Bang.
Great, yeah.
Which is another one.
Great. Yeah, we watched JGD Bang early on. There's a scary character there too, which you have to sort of the child snatching character is weird. So you have to that we had to warn her. The other movie, actually, that we didn't read the book first, but it was great is Sound of Music. Dang. The later on, the second half not so much, but the first half is excellent for kids.
We do listen to that, the Doa Deer song. I don't know why that I sing that to him.
The other thing that we do is not just with reading, is also with sound. Is we have a little record player in my daughter's room, and we got a box of records, Sesame Street records, Mickey Mouse records, and we listen. She listens to them when she goes to sleep, and then certain songs she loves. And then we'd watch like The Muppet Show, we'd watch the Sesame Street, we'd watch Disney movies, and she already knew the songs because she loved the music and the songs are beautiful. So I think there's something really fun too about film scores. She loves Harry Potter so much that she listens to the Harry Potter scores and the Star Wars theme. She knows, I just randomly played I was in the car and I put on a random Harry Potter like orchestral thing from random movie, and she's like, "Oh, Harry Potter." So it's great. I went to a Waldorf school, and one of the big philosophies there is a sort of education that is across different mediums. So if you're reading, like a great example, like Percy Jackson, like if you're reading a Percy Jackson thing, then pull out Dolier's myths and read the Greek myths, and then you go, oh, this is Percy. You can also read the Rick Riordan book, awesome, but you can also spread it out, right? And be like, I think it's something really fun about, or you can be like, here's the soundtrack to that movie. It's just a nice way to
Yeah. As she
keep it
gets
all
older,
together.
you can have her read Emma and then watch the Gwyneth Paltrow version and then watch Clueless.
That exactly. And I think also like there's so many great Easy A, right? That's Scarlet Letter. Like I think there's lots of cool ways to do when she's older to be like, hey, check out the book. Yeah.
Yeah, or in her case, she'll read the book first.
It's like certain things too. I know it takes a lot of time, but I was very lucky when they announced Game of Thrones. A good friend of mine, Michelle, called me and was like, have you ever read the book Game of Thrones? And I was like, no. She said, you must read this book before the show comes out. And I was like, why? She's the same thing. She said, I'm sure the show will be great. She goes, but I want you to have your own imagination of these characters. So I read all the books before the show came out. And I'm like, even now that the show's come out, if you're like, hey, you should read the book, people are like, I don't want to. I already read I already saw the show. And you're like,
Yeah.
just read it. It's awesome.
Yeah. I love what Witherspoon is doing, because I read all of her book club, or I listen to all of her book club books, and they're turning a lot of them into TV shows. And cool. I think novels to TV is such a better way of realizing that story world than a film, because films are more contained than a novel.
Another thing that we do, which I think is fun with my daughter, is that when certain characters pop for her, we make up our own stories and we mix and match, and she has a really good time with that. We have a story that involves Smurfs, Godzilla, and the cast of Star Wars, and we put them all on a mission together, and it's really fun. I just started telling her the story, and then she'll say, can you continue that story? And we do it like TV, it's serialized, it just keeps going and going, and she remembers where we stopped it, and she'll remind me, oh, this is where everyone is. But then if any new character, sometimes she'll be like, oh, can we bring in Hilda? And you're like, sure, Hilda's there. It's really fun because there's certain characters, like weirdly, but she loves Chewbacca.
That must be such a good exercise as a writer, to like know and practice these characters' voices in weird worlds and different scenes.
It's interesting we started with the Smurfs, where we had read all the Smurf stories that we had, and she was playing with Smurf toys. And so she asked me to tell her a Smurf story about one of her Smurf toys. So I made up a Smurf story. And then what I found was really interesting is that almost like a procedural television show, she really likes it if you start the story the same way every time and you tell the same beginning every time. And her favorite character is the Inspector Smurf. And his story always begins with him in an armchair late at night reading a book. And he has these roommates. He's like a little Sherlock Holmes living in the Smurf world that we invented. So there's this form of like, whenever she says, tell me a Smurf story, rather than being like, okay, one day the Smurf story, I was like, okay, Inspector Smurf is sitting in his armchair. Like, and then for me as a storyteller, it's really fun because you're like, okay, what is going to happen this week on Inspector Smurf? And I don't know, I just find it helps me in my imagination, but also it really helps her to that the same way that I feel like kids watch movies over and over again in a way that adults sometimes do, but not as much. Like kids have seen Frozen 30, 40 times or Moana. I don't know. We try to do the same thing with the fiction.
And even with books right now with Miles, I've been reading to him some of the same books his whole life, his whole 17 months.
Yeah.
And he plays at different parts. He recognizes new things. He giggles now at the jokes. Like he's getting it in different ways. It's really fun. But he'll have me read the same book 7 times in a row. And I have to think of like new ways to act it out for him to keep it alive.
I think a big part of that, I think, has to do with activating imagination. And that's why I really like having both sides. And I think it also adds that, even though using the word cinephile, it's about having that critical faculty to look at the film in the placement of film in general, or in the genre, or in as a certain type of story, or as a reflection of something that's happening in the cultural conversation. Like you have at the same time to watch the movie. And I think that part of that is about, yes, movies pull you into an imagination, but I feel if you have your own imagination, you get sucked in a little less, like you understand the construct. Also, and again, every parent I think does this very differently, but I was very clear with my daughter that the people on the screen are actors and that someone because I do it, this is what I do for a living. She said, what do you do all day? I'm like, I write television. What does that mean? These words are words that people say, and there's a camera that films them. Like, so it's interesting because it doesn't interfere with her being sucked in and loving it, but she knows it's construct, right? It's a story.
Yeah.
And that she knows that books are written by people and that those are stories too. And like, it just, otherwise I feel like, I don't know, in a weird way, like movies become real to kids. And that's something that for me, I don't know why I was against it, but it just, not against it, but like why that this time around I wasn't so comfortable with that. I was more like, I don't know, like.
Yeah, it's interesting. Everybody I'm interviewing for this show is in the industry in some form, and their kids can handle more mature content in a lot of ways because they understand that it's a construct and can talk about it. But also, there are some that still are innocent and are able to suspend disbelief into their like in a true sucked in way, and their parents are really cautious about how and what they show them. So I think a lot of it also has to do with the kids' personalities. You might have noticed that your daughter got sucked in so much that you needed to create that division to protect her.
Yeah, I think so. I think also, like, when you're at home, it's one thing. When you're in a movie theater, like we've gone to see a couple of IMAX movies, and which she loves, but she gets very into it. And then when things happen that are jarring or supposed to be spooky, then it does affect her in a different way because it's just so big.
Yeah, similar to VR, when you're consumed little eyes in these big theaters, that's all they can see, and you create a memory, right? You create new memories. And I think any story that transports you, no matter the mechanism, helps you create a memory, and then also open and discover new parts of yourself.
I think also what's cool is like there's a lot of play that can happen around. I think that there's certainly products you can buy for Harry Potter and Star Wars and all that, but it doesn't need to just be like dressing up like those characters is something that we like to do, and acting out parts of the movies are things we like to do. And we also, one of the things we did during the pandemic, which was really fun, was there's a YouTube site where they sort of show you how to draw animation characters. And so we did a lot of that where she was watching Peanuts, and then we were like, let's draw Charlie Brown. And then we would they show you very simply for kids how to draw that character. So we would do that, and then we like, oh, let's dress up like, you want to have a blanket like Linus, like something fun about that. I think a lot of that role play stuff is really great for the imagination, and it's also a great way to continue to talk about with your kids the parts of the story that they like they say they loved it. Like you can always, even with a little kid, you can be like, what did you love about it? What part was exciting, or what part, who's your favorite character? I think like having that conversation after the movie, I think is, we do it as adults, but I think it's really important to do that with kids too.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to wrap us up and ask you my final question, which is, what movie should I show Miles at any age in his life so that he falls in love with cinema?
It's a pretty obvious one, but I'm going to say Star Wars. I think that if you can do it in a movie theater, like if you use any screening of it, or they're doing a revival screening of it, that's just a great one. Because
which one?
The episode 4, A New Hope. It's a really well-made movie, and it has such, I think it'll open up a lot of conversations about storytelling, about hero's journey, about friendship, it's great. And also I just love it. Another movie that I would just say, just to be careful about, is that one thing to be careful is that we all love movies from our past, and then we want to show them to our kids because we're like, we loved it. And sometimes it's hard to remember that like we lived in a different time, and also there's certain things you really want to show your kids and you maybe wait. One of the ones that I think I still have not yet shown my daughter, but I showed my son a little early, was Goonies, which is a great movie. But guess what? There's a lot of weirdness in the Goonies. Like that, a little kid's going to be like, what is going on? And so I just feel like those are the ones too, where you're like, did I make a horrible mistake? So what I've also done a little bit is, if I really feel like, oh, I would love, for example, Monster Squad. I was like, I really want to show Monster Squad. I think it's for kids. And I was like, so I rewatched Monster Squad. And guess what? Like, maybe later. So I just would caution people to be like, I know, because you hopefully have all the time in the world to share all these amazing movies, but have a little, rewatch it yourself and remember, like, for your own nostalgia, and then go.
Yeah. That's good advice. Raven, thank you so much.
It's great chatting with you, always. We have a lot of movies on DVD here in our house, a lot of kids' movies, tons of them. Anytime that Miles wants to grab any movie of any type at any moment in his life, please have him come here and grab a whole armful, okay?
Yeah, we'll maybe set up a projection screen on the beach in San Jose so you and I can get a surf in while they watch a movie.
I love it.
If you enjoyed the conversation, please don't forget to like and subscribe. New episodes release every Wednesday. And leave a comment and let me know which movie you think I should show my son. Until next time, take care.